This lecture will go over qualitative research with a focus on interview and focus group methods. The quote demonstrates the idea that although quantitative measures and quantitative ways of doing research are very significant, there are also qualitative values that are sometimes absent in some of these methods. And so qualitative research becomes a very important skill that you need to have as a practitioner. So let's go into the topic for today. Now, qualitative methods seek deeper understanding of phenomena, often not accounted for in number-based methods, right? As Albert Einstein says, here's another quote: "Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted." And qualitative research answers questions like why, how, in what ways, what motivates, and things like that. A quantitative question could be how many Pizza Hut customers currently order pizza online? And let's see if you can convert this same idea into a qualitative question that might be of interest. So go ahead and pause the video and think about how you might change that question to a why question or a how question. In what way or what motivates? Welcome back. An example could be why do Pizza Hut customers currently order pizza, right? So rather than just how many people, but why do they order pizza online? And how do they do it? Do they use their mobile phones, a computer? In what ways are they able to order these pizza? So it's thinking through this same kind of questions, but the concrete idea is the same whether you're approaching a study qualitatively or quantitatively. You're looking at understanding phenomena, right? But qualitative focuses on a different set of questions that are not always answered in quantitative approaches, right? So a deepening of understanding really is what it's about. It's strategic, systematic, and intentional. Exploratory, so oftentimes used in areas where we don't already know much about the field. For example, a study that might be interested in understanding what motivates people to confront other people when they're engaging in deviant behavior might say, okay, we don't know too much about this field. Why don't we explore this topic through a qualitative research, and then maybe afterwards we could then quantify based on the variables that we find from our qualitative understanding. Inductive rather than deductive. Requires purposeful sampling. So the selection of people to study is intentional, as opposed to just, oh, let's just study everybody and get an average from the community. It's saying who are the people most affected by this lived experience that we're interested in. Involves interpretation rather than aggregation of findings. It's time consuming. It does take a lot of time to get through a qualitative study. Rewards, though, with in-depth understanding and may help generate hypothesis. It's context-based and not generalizable, right? It's not an average, but it gives you a deep understanding of a particular context. Findings in a qualitative research are not generalizable, but they're transferable, right? So you could say, similar to what we found here, we expect to find similar things in this other place. However, it's not generalizable in the sense that because we found this here, therefore it is so and so in that place as well. That's the distinction between qualitative findings and quantitative findings. Some methods used in qualitative interviewing include interview methods, focus groups, ethnography, observation, phenomenology, textual analysis, content analysis, case study, grounded theory, narrative methods, historical methods, and from all of these, we're going to focus on just the first two: interview methods and focus group interviews. What is interviewing? It is an interactional communication process between two parties, at least one of whom has a predetermined and serious purpose that involves the asking and answering of questions. It's quite a mouthful, but let's break it down. Interactional means it involves interactions between people. It's a communication process, right? So it's not just people hanging out and just sitting around each other, but they're communicating, they're passing message across, receiving feedback, and round like that. Two parties. Note that it says parties and not people, because it's possible for you to have a group interview or you can have more than one interviewer So it's two parties, right? At least two parties. And there's often a predetermined and serious purpose for doing this interview, right? So if you're using interviewing for a research purpose, you're trying to find out in-depth understanding of a topic, right? When you talk about the Pizza Hut example, you're trying to understand what exactly makes them your customers order your pizza online, or why do they choose to order online and not in person, or vice versa, right? And of course, it involves the asking and answering of questions. And that's the basics of what an interview is. Interviewing involves basic principles related to the purpose and process of the method. So there's a purpose and a process. It's gathering information of interest to a larger audience, right? Other than just yourself. So whenever you're interviewing, you're trying to get deeper understanding. Say you were doing this for your organization and the company has hired you, or as a consultant, or you're doing this as part of a public relations project. Whatever the goal is, oftentimes you're finding information that's of interest to a larger audience than just yourself. So you're looking at the what, the who, the why, the where, the when, the how. And there are four basic principles of interviewing that I believe are relevant. One, prepare carefully and familiarize yourself with as much background on the topic as possible. Establish a relationship with a source conducive to obtaining information. That's rapport building. Three, ask questions that are relevant to the source and that induce the source to talk. And four, listen and watch attentively. Essentially, what these four basic principles are saying is you need to prepare well by doing your pre-research. Don't go to an interview and ask questions that are very obvious, like, so where do you work? It's like, yeah, that's on my profile online. Did you not do any preparation for this interview? Make sure you research the person or the people you're going to be interviewing carefully before coming to the interview. And when you're in the interview space, establish rapport, right? Build a relationship, because when people are comfortable with you, they're more likely to want to share information with you. They're more likely to want to engage with you. And three, ask questions that are relevant to the source and that induce the source to talk, right? You want to ask good quality questions. Ask questions that make them go, right? Questions that make them really want to talk and express themselves. So ask great quality questions that are relevant to them. Not just because, oh, this is what I want to know, and just ask it, right? Ask things that they would like to talk about as well, right? Build a good relationship. Ask them questions. Show you're interested. And very importantly, listen and watch attentively, right? You're paying attention to both the verbals, what they say, as well as the non-verbals, right? The things that they don't say, but you can tell by inferring from their behavior. That's why a lot of qualitative methods also include observation. That's a very important skill in qualitative research. There are relational elements. Earlier in the previous slide, we talked about building rapport, right? So there are relational elements that are important to any interview situation. And those include trust building, which develops with credibility. So you need to establish your credibility, both in terms of your qualification or what you're trying to do, but also the credibility you build during the interview. That credibility helps the person trust you more, right? So do your homework, do your research, come in and show that you're interested in them and that topic matters. Show respect, show esteem, and a sense of worth for the other person, right? So it should be clear that you respect this individual during the interview process. Similarity is also a good tool for building rapport. You want to show how you and the person are alike. They're more comfortable with you because they can see this similarity between you and them, right? So similarity helps to build rapport, and you do this all through the interview. You find points where you're like, oh, that happened to me as well, and it helps your participant or your source to open up more to you. Interdependence. Both parties rely on one another to produce knowledge, right? So it's not a one-way thing, because during interviews, a lot of times your interviewee would also have questions. Maybe you've asked them something about their understanding and their experience, and they're saying, what about you? What do you think, right? You're not really trying to make the interview about you. You're not trying to talk too much, but you also have to be willing rather to share a little bit about yourself, right? So it's interdependent. It's a relationship, right? An interview situation is not just you come in and just, here is that's what you do with a survey. You just put out a piece of paper and they just tick a bunch of boxes. Interview is a relationship, right? And you're having a conversation with this person. Control is the last element. Control can be directive or non-directive. How that works is typically you come into an interview expecting that the interviewer will have control. And it's good to have control in a sense that you want to ensure that the interview is about the subject that you want to talk about. So you get into an interview sometimes and the person wants to talk about something completely different. So as an interviewer, you need to work on how to balance out the control. You also don't want to have too much control because, again, it's not a survey, right? It's a conversation. You want them to speak from their heart and direct the conversation in the ways that matter to them and talk about the issues that matter to them. Because if you're asking someone about their experience, you need to let them be able to tell you what those experiences are, right? So you need to balance both directive and non-directive questions. Most qualitative interviewing questions are open, right, to allow the participant to kind of decide what direction they want to go with things. Now, distinctions between the two types of interviews that we're going to talk about today. We have one-on-one interviews and focus group interviews. One-on-one interviews, usually you have one participant. In a focus group, you have 5 to 12 participants. One-on-one interview is more of a conversation between the informant and the interviewer, whereas a focus group fosters discussion among participants. And that's the key there. It's a discussion among participants rather than with the moderator, right? So you may also notice that in a one-on-one, it's called an interviewer. In a focus group, you're a moderator. And the moderator is not there to be the one just, directing all the time. The moderator is more so there to help move the conversation along or the discussion along. It's like dropping a pebble in water, right? You want that ripple effect and you want your participants to take over that discussion and share with one another, because the value in a focus group is people coming together and having conversations with each other, interacting with each other. And that's what you want to do in a focus group. Whereas in an interview, you're in a one-on-one interview, you're just asking questions, getting answers, asking them questions, getting answers, asking questions, getting answers. Kind of like a conversation where you're also moving things along, but it's more of a lot of questions rather than a discussion per se. One-on-one interviews provide participants more time to reflect deeply into their experiences because it's just them for about an hour. In a focus group, you don't have that much depth for each individual. However, the interaction widens the range of responses that you're going to get. It triggers forgotten experiences. It relaxes your participants, and it gives them more control to reveal what really matters to them, right? And of course, remember, they're speaking in this situation with people who share the same or similar experience because of purposeful sampling, which we talked about earlier on. The members in the focus group are people who share this kind of experience together, and so they feel comfortable talking to each other about these ideas, right? So focus group allows at least that a lot more than you would in an interview. One-on-one interview is great for studying sensitive topics because it's just the person. It can follow results of a quantitative study or other similar study for in-depth understanding. Focus groups, on the other hand, are great for studying group dynamics because you're having them come together to engage in this activity. You observe how people really feel about what they're talking about, and they get to share and compare ideas. One-on-one interview, the interviewer alone does everything. So ask the questions, record the audio or video, and makes the notes. But in a focus group, you may have 2 moderators combined with an observer who watches what's going on and takes their own notes. It oftentimes would include a note-taking assistant. So there's someone there who actually makes the notes, records the session, and at the end asks clarifying questions and does member check-in. So at the end, this person will be asked, oh, do you have any thoughts? So maybe that was a major question that, the focus group did not really discuss, but they thought was very significant to what you're trying to find out. And so they asked that question by the end of the session to say, oh, can you clarify this idea? And they also do member check-in. So member check-in is really just providing a summary of their takeaways. So from the discussion, here are the key ideas that we're taking away from this interview, this focus group interview. Could you confirm for us that this is true? Do you agree? What are your thoughts about these key ideas? These is what I understand from what you guys have said. How do you feel about that? And so it gives an opportunity for your participants to further discuss that idea or the key takeaways. And sometimes maybe they disagree with something they had said before, or maybe the assistant misunderstood something. They say, oh no, that's not what we meant. And it's an opportunity for you to clarify. One-on-one uses an interview guide, whereas a focus group, it's called a discussion guide, again, because it's a discussion. The unit of analysis is the individual in a one-on-one interview, whereas for a focus group, the unit of analysis is the group, right? So it's not about the one single person or the single members. It's what did the group come up as? So when you analyze the group finding as one idea, right? And in a sense, that makes focus groups sometimes a little more challenging, especially at the recruiting stage, because whereas in an interview, well, one person is one unit of analysis. At a focus group, you're bringing about 5 to 12 people, and that's just one unit. That's just one idea or one idea stream. And so you have to do several. But with purposeful sampling and following something that's called the IXIO code, you wouldn't have to do so many interviews. You just need to be sure that as you're doing the focus group, you're following the ideas. You're finding participants that are most significant to the ideas you want to learn more about. And finally, one-on-one interviews go for 60 minutes, usually, a little less sometimes. Focus group could be 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or 120 minutes. Typically for an online focus group, you might have 90 minutes. In-person focus group could go for as long as 120 minutes. But I think 90 minutes might be the best place either way you want to be. You start thinking about rounding off your interview by 60 minutes, and you slowly get to 90 minutes with member check-in and all those other things in the last 20 or 30 minutes. All right, that's about it for this lesson on the basics of qualitative research, interviewing, and focus group. I think this has been a good session, and hopefully you've been able to learn a thing or two about these two methods.